Good afternoon, colleagues, and again, I'm joining Caspar in welcoming you to this evaluation webinar on evaluation lessons on particularly on women's economic empowerment. And just to give a brief background is that this webinar is part of our knowledge and learning agenda that ESARO has developed and is committed to implementing. So this is the second series, the third actually, of our evaluation knowledge products, covering the 10 different themes related to UN Women's programming areas. So last year, Caspar led a team at UN Women ESARO to develop 10 evaluation knowledge products on different themes. And one of the themes is women's economic empowerment that we'll be discussing today. And again, every year, UN Women produces a large number of evaluations at country and regional level. So these evaluations provide a detailed analysis of our program performance in terms of relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, sustainability, and impact. However, the job of evaluation is not done with the completion of a report. So UN Women believes that reaching the right people with the right information at the right time in the right format is essential to ensuring lessons are absorbed and actually applied from our evaluations. We generate incredible amounts of evidence and data, but at the same time, we face challenges in finding time to read, analyze, and use this evidence to improve our programs, both at country level and at the regional level. So this is a challenge that cannot only be for us UN women that we are facing, but it applies to our sister agencies in the entire UN system. Ultimately, what matters is the extent to which our evaluations are used by ourselves and our partners. Through this webinar, we are testing and piloting multiple avenues to reach our diverse audiences and share evaluations evidence in constructive and useful ways. These knowledge products were produced in a collaborative efforts by our UN Women Evaluation and the Knowledge Management and Communication teams, which are based in UN Women ESARO, East and Southern Africa Regional Office. In addition to the 10 knowledge products that we have produced, we have also produced a short video that summarizes the key findings from the 10 issues that have been summarized in the 10 different themes of these evaluation products. We want to thank all the colleagues who have contributed to developing the knowledge products. I know that country office colleagues participated in this process, and our HQ colleagues also supported this particular process. And of course, we wish you a productive and insightful discussions on this particular series, which focuses on women's economic empowerment. Just to introduce the facilitators of this particular webinar, beginning by myself, my name is Jack Abebe, and I work in the regional office as a knowledge management and research specialist. This particular evaluation was products were led by Caspar Merkle, who is the evaluation specialist for Africa, also based at the regional office for ESARO. The other thematic experts who will be discussing from a country perspective include Ms. Fatou Lo, who is the UN Women Representative for Rwanda Country Office, and our colleague David Mugo, who is based at the UN Women Kenya Country Office within the Women's Economic Empowerment thematic area. So colleagues, welcome, and over to you, Caspar, in terms of the next presentation for this particular webinar. Thank you so much, and over.
Yes, thank you very much, Jack. And I've already put up the first slide. I'll give a very short introduction into some of the key findings that we have looked at based on the evaluation evidence from the past years. So Jack has already covered what we are trying to do in this webinar. We give an overview on the key evaluation lessons. We'll have some feedback from thematic experts from both Rwanda and Kenya. And then, because we want this webinar to be participatory and interactive, we'll open the floor for questions and answers by you, dear participants and colleagues. And by the way, thanks again for joining. I'm very happy to see that we have a very good number of colleagues who have joined this session. And then Jack will close the webinar and also provide feedback on some of the key takeaways that we found in the discussion. So just one slide on the methodology. The evidence that we are presenting here and that we are validating through this discussion is based on a coding and analysis of 26 evaluations that we have done that were completed in this region over the past years. 2015 and 2018 is the sample that we picked for this particular analysis. And for the analysis, we used two frameworks. The colleagues in your women are familiar with that, the thematic areas, and then the organizational effectiveness framework. And we basically looked at where in the evaluations did we find most evidence on particular themes. So this is the process we applied to look at, okay, what information do we actually have? What is the data telling us? And through this process, we identified the top emerging 10 themes based on where we had found the largest amount of evidence. So on this particular topic, women economic empowerment, as we know, we do a lot of programming in that area. And we found quite some substantive lessons and recommendations. So for this particular knowledge product, we looked at a sample. It's a subsample basically from the 26 evaluations. And it looked at 6 evaluations particular. They cover different countries in the region, Mozambique, Rwanda, Kenya, and Tanzania. And this is also the reason why we have the colleagues here from Rwanda and from Kenya who can talk about their own experience with this particular topic. So what is important to note here is that the findings and lessons really go beyond one single evaluation, but they apply across different evaluations. And these are findings that we can generalize because they have quite a good amount of credibility. So on some of the key messages and key lessons, and my presentation is really short because I want to give the floor to the colleagues also to share their own experiences. Obviously, women economic empowerment, we know this is a key thematic area that we are doing work on in Human Women. We have certain entry points. For example, we have on the level of training individual women, we have trainings on income generation. This is capacity building that we do, for example, with women's groups, with community groups, etc. At the policy, at the legislation, at the normative level, we have the big area of gender responsive budgeting and planning. This also includes the work on social protection. And then we have another whole area which actually goes beyond individual women, but really is also looking at communities, is looking at involving men in the programs. It's about changing attitudes and perceptions on this particular area, women economic empowerment. What have some of the lessons been on that area? Again, this is just an extract, and I would like to hear from the colleagues later when I wrap up with my presentation on how these lessons resonate with them. One lesson is around the importance of civil registration. I mean, civil registration is really a prerequisite for many things, for access to credit, for access to loans, access to financial services, also to voting, access to land rights. So this is one key area which we have found to be very important. Then the importance of doing an inclusive targeting, not only working with women, but also with men, so that men are actually seen as agents of change, not as obstacles to a change process, but as agents, as drivers, as co-facilitators for a change process, for a positive change process. And the other thing is, and this applies to the area of capacity building and training, which I already alluded to, is these training packages that we deliver they need to be targeted. They need to use local language. They need to, in particular, when we're looking at working with vulnerable groups, with women with poor education levels, with illiteracy, high illiteracy, it's very important that these trainings on how to, for example, start a business, or how to do better business management, they need to be targeted, and these trainings need to be tailored so that they actually have the intended effect. What are some of the lessons in terms of how UN Women can improve its work on women economic empowerment? And this really talks to the question of having a comprehensive, having a long-term approach and a long-term strategy to this area of economic empowerment. So one issue we found in many evaluations is actually that one training is not enough, or a series of trainings is really not enough. But what needs to follow after the trainings, for example, share information on funding opportunities, share information on financial services and financial on access to credit, for example, to women. So having this inclusive type of approach is really important. We also found in many evaluations, we found the message about the importance of a support package. What does a support package mean? A support package means that we include, for example, a mentorship program, that we do a refresher training, that we do a follow-up training. So in other words, moving away from a one-off or an ad hoc training towards a more inclusive and comprehensive type of support that we're providing. And then finally, the question of partnerships. So we, in UN Women, we constantly face the question of selecting the right partners that are, as we say, fit for purpose, that deliver on results, that have access to the groups we want to reach to, but that also have the capacity, for example, to report on the results. Because doing good work, obviously, nowadays is not enough. We also need to be able, and the partners need to be able to report on results achieved, and to tell us how sustainable these programs on income generation, for example, have been. So this is really the few insights I wanted to share, and I have this last slide on the sources that we have used. So we produced the latest series that is based on a sample of 26 evaluations during the time 2015 to 18. It's available on the UN Women Africa website. And we did a similar analysis on a different sample of evaluations from a different time frame, which is also available on that website. So let me use this opportunity to kick off the discussion and invite our first thematic expert, Fatou, to share her experience from Rwanda. Fatou, are you there?
Josh, just please activate Fatou as a facilitator so that she can be able to speak.
Jack, come again.
Invite Fatou as a facilitator. I think she's she's there as an attendee, so she cannot be able to speak.
Fatou, are you there? Can you hear?
It's done.
Fatou?
She's here, so she just needs to unmute herself now.
Okay, at long last.
Welcome, Fatou. You have the floor.
Thank you. This has been quite a journey.
But we are together now. And
Oh,
we're happy to have you on
absolutely.
board.
I'm just going to turn my mic on and my video on just to say hello, and then I'll switch it off because the internet connection isn't very good today. Our video is not enabled. Okay, good. So let's just move into the discussion. First of all, thank you so much, Caspar, for organizing this webinar, and thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to share a few of my thoughts. I was quite nervous as you were presenting. I was nervous about the technology, so I don't even know now where to start. But let me just say that on your question on how we relate to the findings of this evaluation, I can say that for Rwanda, we can very much relate for all good reasons. The fact that we also had a couple of evaluations in the last 2 years, I would say, 2 to 2.5 years, that also looked at this issue of women's economic empowerment. So many of these lessons that you've presented do find relevance in our own context. And I think many of our country offices will also be able to relate to these findings. I think for me, what I want to say to really add value to this conversation is that in many ways, I find that over time, as UN Women, we every time we do an evaluation, we can almost anticipate some of the findings. So that is, in a way, not for me, not a big issue. For me, the issue, and perhaps what we should be discussing today, is how do we really make sure that our contributions to women's economic empowerment, which we claim as one of the pillars of our strategic plan, and in every single country of its strategic note, it will find itself as a priority area. My biggest concern is, are we really wired and equipped to sort of bring about the transformation that we are hoping to bring as UN Women, but also the transformation that we are expected to bring to the world, to the women, but also all our partners who come to us and look up to us as the go-to place, as the knowledge provider, as the thought leader when it comes to economic empowerment. I am not sure we've done enough by way of putting together a strategy that will allow us to approach economic empowerment in a much more sort of coherent, sustainable, transformative way, but also a strategy that will help us to have the kind of scale and impact. We increasingly hear those two words, that we need to up our game and go for scale and impact. So when I look at our evaluations, they keep telling us that we are everywhere. That's at least my reading. And this applies, by the way, it's not a criticism, it applies really to even what we do in Rwanda. We spread ourselves, and sometimes we spread ourselves way too thin, because we are trying to respond to so many different needs and concerns. And I think as an organization, we still haven't really struck a balance between the importance of addressing women's I would say practical needs and women's strategic needs. And when it comes to addressing gender equality and women's empowerment, it is very, very important to find that balance. Now, of course, that balance doesn't mean you do 50-50. So you are doing strategic level work and then you are doing a little bit of micro level work. It means oftentimes that you are doing the two, because we need also the examples from the field, the transformation that we bring, improvement in women's livelihood. Those are some of the examples that we also take up to influence, for instance, policy work, to bring about improvement in the normative frameworks, and so on and so forth. So I believe that overall, we need to have more clarity over what exactly it is that we want to achieve and what realistically also we can achieve based on our internal capacity when it comes to economic empowerment, the resources that we allocate. Because quite frankly, for me, I would have assumed that a lot of our funding, our resources will go to that area. But when you look at it, the last time I checked, at least on the dashboard, looking at where the bulk of our funding goes, it was more on issues of GBV, on issues of leadership, and so on. So it means that we have our heart in the right place in terms of wanting to tackle economic, to address economic empowerment and to make progress on that front. But then, are we really equipping ourselves and preparing ourselves to do that in a meaningful way, in a consistent way, and in a transformative way. For me, those are really some of the questions that I am grappling with. And I do want to acknowledge the fact that everything that we do matters. In fact, we would not have been doing it if it did not make sense in our respective contexts. So again, I appreciate the work that goes behind our programming, and also the fact that we work within very difficult constraints at times, and we need to speak to the concerns at that time when we are building our strategic note, and depending also on the consultations with our national partners and so on and so forth. But it would be very important if we could mature and move into a space where we can say, okay, as UN Women, this is our comparative advantage. This is our value proposition. This is our value addition. We are going to focus on this. We understand that everything is important. When it comes to gender equality and women's empowerment, everything is important. Everything is a priority, potentially depending on the country context. However, as an organization, we should really move toward articulating that value proposition and trying to remain close to it. Caspar, you mentioned civil registration. You know, you start working with women and then you realize, okay, in order for them to actually have financial inclusion, well, they need to be registered. They need to exist, right? Legally. And so we go back and we start, you know, doing civil registration. But if we had perhaps by now, and the fact that we are developing our new strategic plan gives us a huge opportunity. Everybody is talking about building back better, but I think strategizing also better is something that we should be thinking about. The post-COVID world is going to be very different. Some of the gains that we have achieved over the past few years are at threat. Some of them are being reversed. So it means that our new strategic plan should give us that opportunity to start articulating better that value proposition and to stay close to it, because it will allow us to bring the different pieces together from what we have learned, some of the lessons you've shared, Caspar, but also other lessons that are coming from other regions. And from all of that, we need to put our brains together and say, as an organization, this is our way forward. We are going to do the 2 or 3 things that we believe really matter, and we will stop there. Now, the interesting factor is that we have all the pieces. When I looked at the evaluation, I mean, you can see the different pieces, the policy level intervention, you know, the practical income generating activities for women, the men engaged, the working with private sector, leveraging the webs, leveraging he for she, all the pieces, all the ingredients are there. Working on gender responsive budgeting, working on social protection, all the pieces are there. What we are missing is the strategic choice and the strategic decision to say, out of all of these different elements, where exactly should we put our focus, and where do we need to build partnerships so that these other issues are also being addressed? Because women, most of the time, cannot wait, you know, for all the systemic changes that we hope for to happen. It doesn't mean that we must just leave them hanging. We need to respond. I understand that. And it is very, very important and strategic for us as well. But we also need to just always bear in mind that the situation of women is not something that is happening by chance. This is almost by design. This is because patriarchal attitudes are embedded in all the systems that frame our work and our lives. And we need, therefore, to bring responses that will, at the systemic level, bring about the changes that we hope for. This means working at policy level. This means engaging the decision makers at that level, the microfinance institutions, for instance, and we do a little bit, we're doing increasingly a lot with them, but how do we make sure that that is meaningful and impactful, I think is a question that we have yet to address. So I think for me, really to conclude, what I would say is, you know, the evaluation is very, very useful in telling us how we are contributing to change through our work on women's economic empowerment. But what I will add is that we need to look beyond that and really think about where we need to focus, the orientation, the scale, and the impact. For me, that's really what I would like to say. And the opportunity of this new global strategic plan and the Building Back Better agenda really give us a platform to do that. Thank you. And I'll be happy to answer questions and as we move into the discussion. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, Fatou, and thank you so much for these very important and also very strategic reflections on the question of targeting and strategizing better to have even a better impact for the lives on the ground. Can I also invite the participants to take note of the questions now along the presentations as we speak? We have another colleague who will share his experience with Kenya. David, are you there? And after David's presentation, we'll open the floor for some Q&A to the experts and for everyone who can answer. So this is really a participatory event. I do invite the colleagues to take note for questions as we go along. David, you have the floor.
Yes, I hope I'm clear.
Yes, do you want to share your video or without video?
I think I'm okay like that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah, probably so that I can be able to hurry up. So thank you so much. My name is David and I'm Program Associate, Kenya Country Office. I'm involved on supporting women economic empowerment. We have a lot of things we have done in Kenya, especially on economic empowerment, and we have really shared with regional and even other working groups with other countries. And I have two questions to say whether the research, the findings resonate, and if there is any addition. And before I answer that, I just wanted to win one or two people why women economic empowerment is important, because we find even ourselves, we are not convinced this is important. And we find like we are trying to juggle, are we going to do eval, are we going to do leadership, which is going to take more money? I just wanted to say that women economic empowerment, it is the economic issues are the root cause of the eval issue we usually experience. And they are the main problem why women cannot engage on competitive politics. For instance, in Kenya, I'm going to give you an example. Before I joined UN Women, I was working in a slum, one of the biggest slums in Kenya, where I was supporting discordant couples, HIV discordant couples. I've done that also in Botswana for a while. And one of the biggest challenges we used to realize is that in Kenya, we have very good policies on issues to do with gender-based violence. We have very good policies, I can tell you that. But unfortunately, even if you arrest that man and charge that man, the same woman will fundraise and remove that man from the jail. Why? The woman wants someone to support her financially. Probably people can see that differently, but that explains how a vulnerable woman who is not economically empowered can become so vulnerable to abuse. On the other hand, our politics is so competitive. Without enough finances to do campaign, to do lobbying, to do visibility, it's so hard. And now our women has to sit down and wait for nomination and affirmative slots because it's so difficult, even to men who don't have finances. And if women are empowered financially, one, they can close the existing gender gap. That is one reason, especially in our country, Kenya. Secondly, women economic empowerment usually deal with the root cause, not the symptoms. The symptoms is when we see GBV issue, we start doing awareness and having policies. Those policies, even if you cascade it, you realize the same woman become vulnerable. For instance, in 2019, we have a case of very severe GBV case whereby a man decided to cut a woman the hands. And it's so amazing. During the case, the woman wanted the man to be released because she was saying, who is going to maintain me? What if that woman is financially stable? Her story could have changed because she could have not even waited that man. Probably that man has abused her for a while. Another thing which you need to focus on women economic empowerment is that women play a very major role in economy. For instance, right now we have COVID. Everyone is locked down. But do you know, women are still doing the market work. They are still selling groceries, they are still selling those cabbages, and they are feeding the family. Their work did not stop. They are risking their lives for that. You can see, for instance, in Kenya, 75% women are in agriculture. Unfortunately, it's only less than 30 or 20% who own assets. The others are laborers. It's unfortunate that they don't have capital, they don't have assets. So this is a population which has a very talented, very energized population, which is not well empowered. In Kenya, women are 51%. You can imagine. Yet, it's only like 10% or less own land titles. And therefore, even if we focus on agriculture, we are focusing on women who are just laborers, and we are not be able to maintain them and to empower them. So it's very, very important that we continue allocating more funds and we lobby this. This is a serious thing we need to lobby. If we need to make a turn aloud of issues to do with eval and issues to do with leadership. If you want women to go for elective positions such that they don't have to wait for nomination because they are able. Now, for the lessons learned, actually, we really resonate on these lessons learned. Like, I'm not going to repeat all of them, but I wanted to add something on that. One thing we have learned about lessons learned, it's also very important that we formalize women businesses all over the world. You realize women business are very informal. From Soweto to Nairobi to Egypt to Mexico, women businesses are very, very informal. You realize they are selling groceries, the work they do, it's not formalized. And when those opportunities come, if it's to do with GRP, which Kenya is very good, gender-related procurement, they are passed by the recruitive tenders because the government cannot be able to engage them. Another thing is that the government needs to be inside our negotiation because they are the biggest buyer and they are the one who influence the policies. For instance, in Kenya, we have access to government procurement. Everything the government is procuring, 30% goes to women and youth. You can imagine how many billions. And now the third thing I want to say is putting in the private sector. Private sector is the biggest enabler. They can buy finances to women. Women work well in association than individuals. That's one thing we have learned. Something we can add on that because they have a bargaining power. When women are in association, they can lobby and someone can hear them than when they are fighting their own battle. Another thing is network. We need to have those buyer-seller forum. Our country, Kenya, we are country of UN Women. We are having a lot of buyer-seller forum whereby we bring buyers and suppliers. We bring private sector, government, and women SMEs. And then they have a dialogue like 1 or 2 days. And from there, many women benefit from that and they get courage. On top of that, I want to insist on attitude. Yes, we can say women, they don't have opportunities, but we need also to train them and work on their attitude, because what we have realized is that a woman who is capable cannot even apply for a big tender. They fear that they cannot manage, yet they are knowledgeable, they have all qualifications. So actually they need mentorship. That's what I want to say, so that they can believe themselves and they can be able to, even the elective position. We have capable women who just step back and leave men who are very incompetent to take those positions because they don't feel they can be able to offer the services. And actually they are very good. To add on that, to UN Women fraternity, probably we also need to think like these 4 things I'm going to add. And one is investment. We need to invest big and be consistent. Economic empowerment to women does not require 1 year or 9-month engagement. It's a long term. We train the women, we mentor them, we give finances, they fail the first time, they fail the second time. The millionaires we see all today, some of them have failed 1 million times. Why do we say women when they fail 1 or twice? We blacklist them. We need to start with them and move with them. Another thing is avoiding spreading bean. my colleague have said from Rwanda, this is a very, very, very important thing, because what we usually do to invest big, we need to consolidate our resources and don't spread it. And what we can do is to make sure other thematics like leadership and eval, they are on top of that, such that the resources goes to one project that can deal with leadership, can deal with eval, and can deal with women economic empowerment. But what we do is that we take money to the north for south for leadership, and west for eval. And what we usually do, we get very little resources or none. Finally, I wanted to say that it's very, very important for women economic empowerment. We focus on downstream. Policies are good, but we need to push those policies and implement them. Because if we don't implement them, no one will do it. A woman will suffer in the market when there is policies protecting that woman from unnecessary taxation. Yet we have approved that in our parliaments, and we have said women are doing well. For instance, in Kenya, this Agport Access program, it's a very good thing, but the uptake is very low. You can imagine almost less than 20% women access that. Where does the rest go? It is given to the public. And finally, let's continue benchmarking. There are countries which can do well, although we customize to our work, but it's very, very good that we continue benchmarking what other countries are doing, because you don't have to repeat the same problem which have been done by another country. Rather, we need to learn from them so that we can save resources and time. Finally, I want to say, women economic empowerment, it's a backbone for this society, because when that money goes to that woman, it is a family affair, not just that woman. Thank you so much for listening to me.
David, thank you so much. I think these were some very important messages on the integration of women economic empowerment, for example, with the topic of eval. Also sharing your examples from Kenya on public procurement, the question of formalizing businesses for women. So I think a lot of very important topics that you have raised. Let's open up the floor, and we have started late, so I would kindly ask the participants to hold on. We'll take another few minutes really to have some interaction during this webinar. Let's open the floor. Either you write in the chat your question or your comment, or also if you like, you can raise your hand and ask me, ask the experts we have on the panel for any follow-up, or also if you want to share your own experiences. This is the opportunity. Please, who wants to go first? I think you will need to raise your hand, and then unmute your mic. I see Michael from Tanzania. Wants to say something. Michael, are you there? Are you there, Michael?
Yes, good afternoon, colleagues.
Good afternoon, yes, please.
Yeah, my name is Michael Jerry. I'm working as a program analyst for women's economic empowerment in Tanzania. I just wanted to thank you, colleagues, for this wonderful session. And I just want to ask a question, especially to learn more from colleagues who presented their reflection according to sector-wise, especially after the pandemic. What are the key sectors which they think will be potential for us to focus on with more support? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for that question. Maybe who wants to take on that question? Fatou, are you there? The question was, I think, about which sectors should should we focus on? And I recall your presentation was very much about making strategic choices.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Caspar, and thank you, Michael, for that question. I think it's in my view, and based on the socio-economic impact assessments of this this COVID crisis, we know that you know there are some sectors that we should definitely prioritize moving forward. Probably the first one, in my view, would be this whole area of digital literacy and making sure that women and women entrepreneurs and young women can participate effectively in the virtual economy, because that's really what is emerging as an area that is likely to grow and to expand. I mean, you've seen businesses that were well established online literally boom and expand and grow so much. I mean, those were the biggest winners of this crisis, making billions of dollars just because they were able to facilitate e-commerce, anything that has to do with online transactions and so on. And we found at the same time our women suffering a lot because they were in the informal sector and could not, in most of the cases, even reach out to their customers. So I think it will be very, very important. Of course, digital literacy is not a sector per se, but I'm saying this is an area that we should prioritize, and it has different elements from facilitating access to financial services online. And thank God that we have excellent examples to build from, you know, whether it's M-Pesa or it's Momo in Rwanda. I mean, we do have ways in which we can leverage the potential of the digital economy to benefit women and women entrepreneurs and young women to really launch new areas of work and grow, I believe, seize the opportunities that are being presented to them. I think that another area that, in my view, is very, very critical remains the agriculture sector for two reasons. Number one, that's where we have the majority of women to this day. The majority of women in Africa in general are in the rural area and evolving in the agriculture sector. We have tried to engage with more or less success in that area. And when we think about the experience of Rwanda, for instance, we've tried to bring innovation into agriculture through the Buy From Women platform. But again, these are some of the examples where I say we are not consistent, because we bring in something, we bring in innovation, and then we don't sustain it, or we face hurdles that as an organization we are not wired to tackle. Because technology is not something easy. You don't just engage in it and all of a sudden you become the guru. That requires investment and a long-term investment, to borrow a term that David mentioned earlier. So I think we have to look at how we support women in agriculture sector. So I was saying that the first reason is that's where the majority of women are. But the second reason is that we found women farmers to be quite resilient during the pandemic. So in the rural areas, just being able to continue to produce, even if it is, you know, some vegetables here and there, at least people were not, women in the rural areas were able to still, you know, feed themselves and feed their families. So we definitely need to support them. And I think agriculture moving forward just has such a great potential. I mean, during the crisis, we realized that some services were essential services, and definitely agriculture was one of them. Not that we've ever neglected or ignored its importance, but I think it took a whole new level of importance during this crisis, because people still had to be fed. People still had to take care of, you know, their children and feed them and etc. So I think, for me, I would really believe that those two areas need a lot of attention. Now, there are some other sectors where we are not so active as UN Women, but that we could look at. I mean, the whole issue around strengthening health system, because so many women are there as frontline workers. They are not the one earning the most from this health system, yet they are the most exposed. They are at the forefront of the response. They have taken on so much more unpaid care work, which means we need to invest again in labor-saving technology, in time-saving technology. So I think our work is cut out for us. Those are maybe the few areas I wanted to mention. But I think because I like to transform systems, at the end of the day, that's the only way you bring about sustainable change. That's how you avoid running around doing everything yourself. You have to make sure that these transformation we are seeking are embedded in the existing systems. That's the only way we will avoid having to hold the woman's hand 3 years in a row. Because remember, we are an organization that relies very much on donor funding to do the work that we do. Now, do you think donors will just give us the money and say, okay, you hold the hand of these women until they can stand on their feet? And also, are we the best one to do that? Just look at the resources we have as an organization, like the staffing on economic empowerment. Who is there? The Women's Economic Empowerment section at headquarters itself. I think they haven't had a chief in so many years. So are we really walking the talk? Are we really making the investment that allow us to decide strategically the areas that we focus on? I'm afraid we are yet to address that question and to really make the right investment so that we stop running around and spreading ourselves thin, and we transform systems moving forward. And yes, I agree. In the meantime, everything we can do to support the women on the ground, we keep doing it. But sometimes that goes through partnerships. We don't have to do everything. Gender is everyone's business. And that's the message that we need to keep pushing while we keep doing the work. Because ultimately what we want is by 2030 to have achieved gender equality. I'm not sure we are very much on track. But that is, remember, that was the goal we had set out for ourselves. But if we keep running around, doing everything and doing it ourselves, we will never achieve that goal, not in 2030 and not in 2050, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatou. I think this was a very comprehensive answer. And also I like the fact that, I mean, your reminder about working in partnerships. I think this is something we tend to forget because we are so busy with ourselves. So yes, partnerships are essential and key for achieving any long-term impact. I'm looking at the participants. We had a hand up by Barbara, but the hand went down. And then we have Lillian.
Can I contribute on Fatou?
Yes, please. Maybe just if I can ask to keep it short, and we have time for another question also.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Exactly. Actually, I can't agree more than what actually Fatou has said. She has picked my two issues. And one of the things which is low-lying fruit, especially right now we have a COVID, is focusing on SME, small and micro enterprises. First of all, we make sure we formalize their businesses. After formalizing their businesses, we make sure we go digital marketing. Digital marketing, it's something like, especially in Kenya right now, it has been picked by the government so much because they have realized this a very booming area that we have not been able to tap. And women are doing very well in this type of marketing. Right now, we have women who can do shopping and bring to people in their houses through these issues to do with digital migration. They can sell their things abroad. And this actually help them because for those who are not mobile, they just need to do that in their houses. They just need internet. So focusing on SME, but this has to do with, first of all, we formalize their business such that they are not informal. Another thing we are talking about is agriculture, food. There is COVID or not, people has to eat. And in this case, we also need to think about urban farming. We have a very big population in urban. And because right now we have the knowledge of CSA, climate smart agriculture, whereby you can even do a lot of farming in your balcony, do a lot of vegetables, and actually you can be able to feed the family. It's a very, very good thing that right now we are focusing on. You can see in Kenya, 70% of women actually in agriculture, yet only less than 20% who own assets or who are employers. The rest are laborers. They are working in coffee farms. And by the end of the day, probably they earn very little by the end of the month. And therefore, it's so much important we empower them. Another thing, if we have to intervene, especially at a time like now, every donor is trained, our traditional donors. We need to focus on private sector. And focusing on private sector, we have to make sure there is value for money. Value for money. When you are dealing with a bank, They need profit out of that business. Therefore, UN Women has to change the way we do things and make sure this person is not giving funds. He is coming here, you exchange ideas because you also need to benefit. This person bring money, women invest on it, they grow the products. When they sell, we take back the money, or probably he get the market for that. There is a very nice relationship in that. And probably finally is to see how can we invest heavily also in the health system. Health system has been left to the government, but it's an area that has a lot of opportunities. Women can venture, especially on SME, and they can start sustain their lives. And in so doing, they can really support the society to acquire and get some of the services that have become so difficult and so expensive initially. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, David, and thank you for that very important addition. I see Lillian also raised her hand. Lillian, you have the floor.
Okay, hello. Yes, good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for the very insightful presentation and the evaluation that have been conducted. I just want to bring some sort of reflections and maybe hear from the panelists. As we team, where do we see the role of education? I'm talking here of the formal education. Of course, we have been focusing a lot also to provide this informal education, but I think also education is a very high place. And the reason why we are seeing most businesses and most women enterprises at the informal sector is because I believe due to lack of education. So perhaps this is something that we should partner with other agencies. And I believe this is something that if we need to venture in, it will take a long time. But based on the context in Tanzania, what we are seeing on the ground, you see that education has a big role to play, and it explains a lot where the businesses of these women are and why most of them are the informal sector. And I think the other important thing, as we speak of and we plan our intervention, perhaps it would be important to deep dive to say, when we're speaking of interventions, who is the persona that we're looking at? Is it a rural woman? Is it an urban woman? Is it an educated or illiterate woman? Because some of these interventions, I think it would be good to learn more. For instance, we are saying with COVID-19, there is a very good space for digital economy. I agree to that. But then what do we do to ensure even the rural women with their circumstances, they benefit with this digital? And this is why I also brought the issue of education. Perhaps we should also deep dive and digest how can we make these women that we are talking about really participate in the digital economy that is booming up, considering different personas, rural, urban, youth, women. I think we really, as we are trying to strategize and to identify our niche, we also need to really deep dive the persona of the women that we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian. And Lillian, you're based in Tanzania, I understand correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe Fatou and David, a brief answer on that question that Lillian asked. And then unless we have other questions, I think looking at time, we unfortunately need to wrap up. But let's give an answer to that question, please, first. Who wants to go first? David or Fatou?
Okay.
I'll let David go since I spoke earlier. Maybe David can take it.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really concur with Lillian that education is important, but there is something we have also learned, that education, there is something cannot do when it comes, especially to the booming of the business. For instance, we have people who are so much educated and they have done even MBAs in Kenya, but they cannot even have a small shop. But we came to realize there is something missing between our education system and what is happening on the out. Sometimes it's not well customized. And what is missing to our people is soft skills. Skills for lobbying, skills for negotiation, skills for even advertising your work, skills for making sure that you can learn firsthand from another person what they are doing. So one thing we realize about women empowerment is that women are lacking soft skills, because especially being in Nairobi, the forums we have, you meet very, very educated people, but they are struggling to put up a business. Yet they have done even business courses and they have progressed. I don't want to demean education. It's very, very, very important. But at the level we are right now, what we need, we have a society which has so much neglected the informal sector. Very little budget for empowerment. And that's why we usually think the people in the informal sector, they are not educated. But I can tell you this, if you go to developed countries, you find the work they do in the informal sector, you get engineers, you get very brilliant people doing that work. Like in our juakari, we call it juakari in our informal sector. You can get very educated people doing that work, and they are also doing well. And those who are not so much educated, they have skills to make sure that they earn the livelihood. So to start with, we can advocate for education, which is a long-term engagement. But meanwhile, let's also see how we can make sure that the people we are engaging, that is the women, they have the soft skill. Soft skill helps so much. It helps those women. And actually, if you can see, even the whole world, actually, do you know some of the most brilliant billionaires, actually, they have just a basic education. I don't know whether it's coincidence, but there is something like, if you learn the soft skill of the game, you can do very well. I think that's a low-hanging fruit. If we can be able to empower women and tell them there is hope. And actually, that's informal sector. It is the one that is sustaining the country. And therefore, if you can be able to empower them, it can really help. At the same time, let's make sure we also have policies to make sure women access education without discrimination. Thank you.
Great, David. Thank you very much. Fatou, do you want to add, or did he cover adequately?
Yeah, I think he covered it. Thank you. And there are many aspects to the question, but I think, it's fine. He addressed it very well. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, dear colleagues, we are behind time already. We started late, but we carved out a few additional minutes. But we now, unfortunately, really need to wrap up. I would like to invite Jack, who has agreed to provide a summary from the discussion, and Jack will also do the closing. Jack, please, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you so much, Caspar. Thanks, Fatou. Thanks, David and colleagues. And I think that the discussion has been very, very helpful. From the two perspectives, country perspectives, I think what is coming out resoundingly is that we need to adopt a more sustainable model of women's economic empowerment, a model that is not only sustainable but scalable and also impactful, and can provide transformation in the lives of women and girls that we target. I think this was really brought out by Madame Fatou, and which is really, really appreciated. And I think we also appreciate the input that came out around drilling down, that we need to be more focused so that we are not doing everything, but striking a balance with the reality of the resources that we have, and sort of being also consistent in whatever we do, to avoid one-off investments, but have investments that are much more sustainable and give us value proposition as UN Women. I think that came out very, very strongly. The other thing that I think came out, and this has really been stressed again by David, is the fact that we all appreciate that women's economic empowerment is actually the bedrock of women's empowerment. and simply because when women are empowered, then their vulnerability is reduced. It increases their competitiveness in the market and also in various spaces, including political space. But it also deals with the root cause and not mere symptoms of the problems that women face in everyday life. And of course, I think the other emphasis that came out is the role of women in the economy, particularly at country level, and the fact that we need to strike strategic partnerships, and partnerships that not only focus on the CSOs and other stakeholders, but the government as a major partner, because the government is actually the the major buyer at country level, and also partnership with the private sector because of financing and also being able to support women in whatever they do. And the other issue is in terms of policy implementation, which I think is very, very important at country level. How do we ensure that policies are operationalized? Because we may have them, but they are there in writing and not sort of operationalized. And I think the last thing is in terms of benchmarking for good practices, promising practices, and lessons learned from different countries. I think this would be very helpful, and I think that we can organize such virtual forums where we discuss also these specific issues. And the last thing I want to say is, which also came out, is the context of COVID-19. How do we move forward in terms of ensuring that we live to the realities of the impact of COVID-19 while we progress our women's economic empowerment in interventions? I think that is really, really very, very important as well as we move forward. And I think those are the key issues that came out from colleagues. And I've seen from the chat's colleagues have appreciated the session, and hopefully we have another one that can be able to build us much more. Thank you so much, Caspar, for the leadership, and over from myself. So colleagues, I think with that then, with the permission of Caspar, then we can close this webinar, but I know that we'll also share the audio of the webinar and any other presentations. And Caspar, if you have any other thing to say as we close, thanks.
Jack, I think you have covered it excellently. Thank you for the very succinct summary. Thank you to all the participants, and we will make available the recording for this webinar. And please spread the word for the next session. Thank you and have a good day. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Fatou,
for organizing. And we hope to have more opportunities like this. It really makes a difference to just share and learn from each other. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
Bye.